Period of adjustment. High point over a cavern. A serious comedy. To the director and the cast. The scene. The action of the play takes place in Ralph Bates's home, Memphis, Tennessee. The time is Christmas Eve. Act 1. The set is the interior and entrance of a cute little Spanish-type suburban bungalow. 2 rooms are visible on stage: the living room with its small dining alcove and the bedroom. There are doors to the kitchen and bath. A bit of the stucco exterior surrounds the entrance, downstage right or left. A Christmas wreath is on the door, while above the door is an ornamental porch light or coach lantern with amber glass or possibly glass in several colors. The fireplace in the fourth wall of the set is represented by a flickering red light. Of course, the living room contains a TV set with its back to the audience. Its face to a big sofa that opens into a bed. The dog is a Cocker Spaniel. There's a rather large Christmas tree decorated with a child's toys under it, and a woman's fur coat in an open box. But no child and no woman. Ralph Bates, a boyish-looking man in his middle 30s, is approaching the TV set, facing upstage, with a can of beer and an opener. TV commercial. Millions of Americans each day are discovering the difference between the new miracle product and the old horse and buggy type of cleanser, which made wash day a torture to mom and left her too tired at sundown to light up the house with the sunshine of her smile. Ralph. No snow. He hoists himself onto a very high bar stool facing the TV. TV commercial. So don't let unnecessary fatigue cast a shadow over your household, especially not at this. He leaps off the stool and crouches to change the channel. He gets snatches of several dramatic and musical offerings, settles for a chorus of White Christmas, sighs, picks up a poker and stabs at the flickering ruddy light in the fourth wall. It comes up brighter. He crouches to fan the fire with an antique bellows. The fire brightens. He sighs again, hoists himself back onto the brass-studded, rather leather-topped stool, which has evidently been removed from the cute little bar, which is upstage. For theatrical purpose, this stool is about a half a foot higher than any other sitting surface on the stage. Whenever Ralph assumes a seat on this stool, he is like a judge, mounting his judicial bench. Except he's not pompous or bewigged about it. He is detached, considering, thinking. And over his face comes that characteristic look of a gentle gravity, which is the heart of Ralph. Perhaps his pose should suggest Rodin's thinker. Ralph is one of those rare people that have the capacity of heart to truly care, and care deeply about other people. A car horn, urgent, is heard out front, off stage. Ralph slides off the stool and rushes out the front door. He stands under the amber coach lantern. It's snowing. The snowflakes are projected on his figure. Tiny, obliquely falling particles of shadow. There's a muffled shout from the car that stopped below the terrace of the bungalow. Ralph, shouting back. Hey there, driver up under the carport. George, Texas voice. What you say, boy? Ralph, put her under the carport. George, wheels won't catch. Too steep. Ralph, back her all the way out and then shoot her up in there first. Isabel's voice, high-pitched with strain. Please let me out first, George. There's a sound of a car door. Ralph ducks back in, grinning, and seizes a carton of rice. Ralph, yeah, come on in, little lady. Isabel appears before the house, small and white-faced with fatigue, eyes dark-circled, manner dazed and uncertain. She wears a cheap navy blue cloth coat, carries a shiny new patent leather purse, has on red wool mittens. Ralph pelts her with rice. She ducks the bombardment with a laugh that's more like a sob. Isabel. Oh, no, please. I never want to see rice again in my life. Not uncooked, anyhow. That fire looks wonderful to me. I'm Isabel Crane, Mr. Bates. She removes a red mitten and extends her hand. Ralph. I thought you'd married that boy. Both speak in deep southern voices. Hers is distinctly Texan. Isabel. I mean Mrs. George Haverstick. She says her new name with a hint of grimness. Ralph, still in the door. Wait till I put my shoes on, I'll come out. Shout is unheard. Isabel. You have a sweet little house. Ralph, with a touch of amiable grimness. Yeah, we sure do. Wheels can't get any traction. It's too damn steep. He shouts down. Lock it up and leave it out front. I guess he's gonna do that. Yup. That's what he's doing, That's what he's doing. Isabel. Does it snow often in Memphis? Ralph. No, rarely. He gives her a glance. Ralph has a sometimes disconcerting way of seeming either oblivious to a person he's with or regarding the person with a sudden intense concentration, as if he just noticed something startling or puzzling about them. But this is a mannerism that the actor should use with restraint. Isabel. It was snowing all the way down here. It's my first acquaintance with snow, except for one little flurry of snow in St. Louis the day before Thanksgiving Day. This is my first real acquaintance with a real snow. What is he doing down there? Ralph. He's unloading the car. Isabel. I just want my small zipper bag. Will you please call down to him? That's all I want of my things. Ralph, shouting. Leave all that stuff till later. I didn't know you could get all that in the car. Isabel. Surely he isn't removing our wedding presents. Is he insane, Mr. Bates? She goes to the door. George, just my small zipper bag, not everything in the car. Oh, Lord. She retreats into the room. He must think we're going to live here for the rest of our lives. He didn't even warn you all we were coming. Ralph. He called me up from West Memphis. Isabel. Yes, just across the river. Ralph. What is that car, a caddy? Isabel. It's a 52 Cadillac with a mileage close to 120,000. It ought to be retired with an old age pension, Mr. Bates. Ralph at the door. It looks like one of them funeral limousines. Isabel, wryly. Mr. Bates, you have hit the nail on the head with the head of a hammer. This is just what it was. It's piled up 120,000 miles between Berkmeyer's mortuary and various graveyards serving greater St. Louis. Judge, can you hear me, Judge? Excuse me, Mr. Bates. She slips past him onto the terrace again. Judge, just my small zipper bag. Indistinct shout from below, she turns back in. I give up, Mr. Bates. She ducks under his arm to enter the house again and stands behind Ralph in the doorway. Ralph, still chuckling at the door. What's he want with a funeral limousine on a honeymoon trip? Isabel. I asked him that same question and got a very odd answer. He said there's no better credit card in the world than driving up at a bank door in a Cadillac limousine. She tries to laugh. Oh, I don't know. I love Spanish-type architecture, Spanish mission-type houses. I don't think you ought to stand in that door with just that light shirt on you. This is such a sweet house. She seems close to tears. Something in her tone catches his attention, and he comes in, closing the door. Ralph. Yeah, well, how's it going? Is the marriage in orbit? Isabel tries to laugh at this too. Oh, will you please do me a favor? Don't encourage him, please. Please don't invite him. Don't invite him to spend the night here, Mr. Bates. I'm thinking of your wife. Because last night in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, he thought it would be very nice to look up an old war buddy he had there, too. He sincerely thought so. And possibly the war buddy thought so, too, but not the wife. Oh, no, not that lady, no. They'd hardly got through their first beer cans with Remembrances of Korea when that bright little woman began to direct us to a highway motel, which she said was only a hop, skip, and jump from their house. But turned out to be almost across the state line into Arkansas? Yes, Arkansas. I think I can take this off now. She removes a red woolen muffler. He takes it from her and she murmurs, "Thanks." What is holding him up? Why is he... Mr. Bates, I did tell him that this is one night of the year when you just don't intrude on another young married couple. Ralph. Aw, come off that, little lady. Why, I've been begging that boy ever since we got out of the service to come to Memphis. He had to get married to make it. Why, every time I'd get drunk, I'd call that boy on the phone to say, "Get the hell down here, you old Texas jackrabbit." And I'd just about given up hope he'd ever show. Isabel. Is he still fooling with luggage? There's a noise outside. Ralph goes to the open door. Ralph. Hey! Isabel. What? Ralph. He put those bags at the door and run back down to the car. Isabel. What did he? Ralph. Gone back down for more luggage. I'll take these in. Isabel, as the bags are brought in. Those are my pieces of luggage. All but the small zipper bag, which is all that I wanted. Ralph, calling out the open door. Hey. Isabel. What? Ralph. Hey, boy. He's gotten back in the car and driven off. Isabel, rushing to the door. Driven? Off? Did you say? My heavens, you're right. He's gone. Mr. Bates, he deposited me on your hands and driven away. She's stunned. Oh, how funny. Isn't this funny? Laughs wildly, close to sobbing. It's no surprise to me, though. All the way down here from Cape Girardeau, where we stopped for our wedding night, Mr. Bates, I had a feeling that the first chance he got to, he'd abandon me somewhere. Ralph. Aw, now take it easy. Isabel. That's what he's done. Put me and my bags in your hands and run away. Ralph. Aw, now, no. The old boy wouldn't do that. For Christ's sakes, he just remembered something he had to go and get at a drugstore. Isabel. If that was the case, wouldn't he mention it to me? Ralph. Oh, no. I known that boy a long time, and he's always been sort of a way out, but never way out that far. Isabel. Where's your wife? Where's Mrs. Bates, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Oh, she's not here right now. Isabel. I'm such a fool. She giggles a little hysterically. Oh, I'm such a fool. Why didn't I know better? Can you answer me that? I hope the news of our approach didn't drive your wife away on Christmas Eve, Mr. Bates. Ralph. No, honey. Isabel. He brought up everything but the little blue zipper bag, which is all I asked for. It had my night things in it. Ralph. Just let me get you a drink. I'm sorry I don't have any eggnog, but I can make a wonderful hot buttered rum. How about a little hot buttered rum? Isabel. Thank you, no, I don't drink. Ralph. It's never too late to begin to. Isabel. No, I don't want liquor. Ralph. Coffee? Want some hot coffee? Isabel. Where's your wife, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Oh, she's not here now. I'll tell you about that later. Isabel. She will be outraged. This is one night of the year when you don't want outside disturbances on your hands. Ralph. I think I know what to give you. Isabel. I did expect it, but yet I didn't expect it. I mean, it occurred to me, the possibility of it, but I thought I was just being morbid. Ralph. Ah, now, I know that boy. We've been through 2 wars together, took basic training together and officers training together. He wouldn't ditch you like that unless he's gone crazy. Isabel. George Haverstick is a very sick man, Mr. Bates. He was a patient in neurological at Barnes Hospital in St. Louis. That's how I met him. I was a student nurse there. She is talking quickly, shrilly. She has a prim, severe manner that disguises her prettiness. Ralph. Yeah? What was wrong with him in the hospital, honey? Isabel. If we see him again, if he ever comes back to this house, you will see what's wrong. He shakes. Sometimes it's just barely noticeable. Just a constant slight tremor, a sort of vibration, like an electric vibration in his muscles or nerves. Ralph. Aw, that old tremor has come back on him, huh? He had that thing in Korea. Isabel. How bad did he have it in Korea, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Like a heavy drinker, except he didn't drink heavy. Isabel. It's like he had Parkinson's disease, but he doesn't have it. She speaks like an outraged spinster, which is quite incongruous to her pretty childlike appearance. Ralph. What in the hell is it then? Isabel. That is a mystery. He shakes. That's all. He just shakes. Sometimes you'd think that he was shaken to pieces. Was that a car out front? She goes to the window. No. I've caught a head cold, darn it. Blows her nose. When I met Mr. George Haverstick, excuse me, you're watching TV. Ralph, turning off, said, No, I'm not watching TV. Isabel. I'm so wound up, sitting in silence all day beside my silent bridegroom. I can't seem to stop talking now, although I hardly know you. Yes. I met him at Barnes Hospital, the biggest one in St. Louis. Where I was taking my training as a nurse, he had gone in Barnes instead of the Veterans Hospital, because in the Veterans Hospital they couldn't discover any physical cause of this tremor, and he thought they just said there wasn't any physical cause in order to avoid having to pay him a physical disability. Compensation. I had him as a patient at Barnes Hospital on the night shift. My, did he keep me running. The little buzzer was never out of his hand. Couldn't sleep under any kind of sedation less than enough to knock an elephant out. Well, that's where I met George. I was very touched by him, honestly. Very, very touched by the boy. I thought he sincerely loved me. Yes, I have a head cold. Or am I crying? I guess it's fatigue. Exhaustion. Ralph. You're just going through a period of adjustment. Isabel. Of course, at Barnes he got the same diagnosis, or lack of diagnosis, that he'd gotten at the Vets Hospital in Korea and Texas and elsewhere. No physical basis for the tremor. Perfect physical health. Suggested psychiatry to him. He blew the roof off. You'd think they'd accused him of beating up his grandmother, at least, if not worse, I swear. Mr. Bates, I still have sympathy for him, but it wasn't fair of him not to let me know he'd quit his job at the airfield till after our marriage. He gave me that information after the wedding. Right after the wedding, he told me. Right on the bridge, Eads Bridge, between St. Louis and East St. Louis, he said, Little bit, take a good look at St. Louis, because it may be your last one. I'm quoting him exactly. Those were his words. I don't know why I didn't say drive me right back. Isn't it strange that I didn't say turn around on the other side of this bridge and drive me right back? I gave up student nursing at a great hospital to marry a man not honest enough to let me know he'd given up his job till an hour after the wedding. Ralph. George is a high-strung boy, but they don't make them any better. Isabel. A man's opinion of a man. If they don't make them any better than George Haverstick, they ought to stop production. Ralph throws back his head, laughing heartily. No, I mean it. If they don't make them better than a man that would abandon his bride in less than how many hours? On the doorstep of a war buddy and drive on without her or any apology to her, if that's the best they make them, I say don't make them. There is a pause. She has crouched before the fire again, holding her hands out to the flickering glow. Did George tell you on the phone that he's quit his job? Ralph, pouring brandy. What job did he quit, honey? Isabel. He was a ground mechanic at Lambert's Airfield in St. Louis. I had lost my job, too. I hadn't quit, no. I was politely dismissed. My first day in surgery. I fainted. When the doctor made the incision and I saw blood, I keeled over. Ralph. It's understandable, honey. Isabel. Not in a nurse. Not in a girl that had set her heart on nursing. That. How long has he been gone? Ralph. Just a few minutes, honey. Xmas Eve traffic is heavy, and George being George, he may have stopped at a bar on his way back here. You'd been going steady how long? Isabel. Ever since his discharge from Barnes Hospital. Isn't this suburb called High Point? Ralph. Yes, High Point over a cavern. Isabel. His place was in High Point, too. Another suburb called High Point, spelled high-point, hyphenated. Ralph. I guess all fair-sized American cities have got a suburb called High Point, hyphenated or not. But this is the only one I know of that's built on a cavern. Isabel. Without really listening to him. Cavern? She laughs faintly as if it were a weak joke. Well, I said, George, on the bridge, we're not driving down to Florida in that case. We're going to find you a job. We're going from city to city until you find a new job, and I don't care if we cross the Rio Grande. We're not going to stop until you find one. Did I or didn't I make the right decision? In your opinion, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Well, how did he react to it? Isabel. Stopped talking and started shaking. So violently I was scared he would drive that funeral car off the road. Ever since then, it's been hell. And I am... She springs up from the fireplace chair. Not exactly the spirit of Christmas, am I? She goes to the window to look out. Sees nothing but windy snow. There is a low rumble. A picture falls off the wall. What was that? Ralph. Oh, nothing. The ground just settled a little. We get that all the time here because this suburb, High Point, is built over a great big underground cavern and is sinking into it gradually, an inch or 2 inches a year. It would cost $3,000 to stabilize the foundation of this house, even temporarily. But it's not publicly known, and we homeowners and the promoters of the project have got together to keep it a secret till we have sold out, in alphabetical order. At a loss, but not a complete sacrifice. Collusion, connivance. Disgusting, but necessary. She doesn't hear this. Murmurs, "What?" as she crosses back to the window at the sound of a car going by. Isabel. It's funny. I had a hunch he was going to leave me somewhere. She laughs sadly, forlornly, and lets the white window curtains fall together. Ralph. Why don't you take off your coat and sit back down by the fire? That coat keeps the heat off you, honey. That boy's coming back. Isabel. Thank you. She removes her coat. Ralph, observing with solemn appreciation the perfect neatness of her small body. I'm sure that boy's coming back. I am now positive of it. That's a cute little suit you're wearing. Were you married in that? Isabel. Yes, I was married in this traveling suit. Appropriately. Ralph. You couldn't have looked any prettier in white satin. Ralph is at the bar preparing a snifter of brandy for her. Now he puts a match to it, and as it flares up blue, she cries out a little. Isabel. What are you... Ralph. Something to warm up your insides, little lady. Isabel. Wasn't that sweet of you? Will it burn if I touch it? Ralph. No. Take it. Isabel. Beautiful. Let me hold it to warm my hands first before it. He puts the snifter glass of blue flaming brandy in her hands, and they return to the fireplace. I'm not a drinker. I don't think doctors or nurses have any right to be, but I guess now I'm out of the nursing profession. So, what a sweet little bar. What a sweet little house. And such a sweet Christmas tree. Ralph. Yeah, everything's sweet here. I married a homely girl, honey, but I tried to love her. Isabel doesn't really hear this remark. Isabel. I hope your wife didn't take your little boy out because we were coming. Ralph. I sure did make an effort to love that woman. I almost stopped realizing that she was homely. Isabel. So he didn't actually tell you he was going to a drugstore, Mr. Bates? Ralph, uncomfortably. He didn't say so. I just figured he was. Isabel. Well, he's abandoned me here. Ralph. How long have you known George? Isabel. I'm afraid I married a stranger. Ralph. Everybody does that. Isabel. Where did you say your wife was? Ralph. My wife has quit me. Isabel. No. You're joking, aren't you? Ralph. She walked out on me this evening when I let her know I'd quit my job. Isabel, beginning to listen to him. Surely it's just temporary, Mr. Bates. Ralph. Nope. Don't think so. I quit my job, and so my wife quit me. Isabel. I don't think a woman leaves a man as nice as you, Mr. Bates, for such a reason as that. Ralph. Marriage is an economic arrangement in many ways. Let's face it, honey. Also, the situation between us was complicated by the fact that I worked for her father. But that's another story. That's a long other story, and you got your mind on George. Isabel. I think my pride has been hurt. Ralph. I told you he's coming back, and I'm just as sure of it as I'm sure Dorothea isn't. Or if she does, that she'll find me waiting for her. No. I'm cutting out of this high point over a cavern on the first military transport I can catch out of Memphis. Isabel, vaguely. You don't mean that, Mr. Bates. You're talking through your hat out of hurt feelings, hurt pride. She opens the front door and stands looking out as forlornly as a lost child. She really does have a remarkably cute little figure, and Ralph takes slow, continual, and rather wistful stock of it with his eyes. Ralph. I got what I had coming to me, that I admit, for marrying a girl that didn't attract me. He comes up behind her at the door. Isabel. Did you say didn't attract you? Ralph. No, she didn't attract me in the beginning. She's 1 year older than me, and I'm no chicken. But I guess I'm not the only man that would marry the only daughter of an old millionaire with diabetes and gallstones and one kidney, am I? Isabel. It's nice out here. Ralph. But I'm telling you, I'm convinced there is no greater assurance of life. Seems to thrive on one kidney, and he tosses the beer can down the terrace. Oh, they live on anything. Nothing. Isabel. Do you always throw beer cans on your front lawn, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Never before in my life. I sure enjoyed it. George is going to be shocked when he sees me. I sacrificed my youth to Isabel. What? Ralph. Yep, it's nice out here. I mean, nicer than in there. Isabel. You sacrificed your youth? Ralph. Oh, that? Yeah. I'll tell you more about that unless it bores you. Isabel. No. Ralph. She had fallen into the hands of a psychiatrist when I married this girl. This psychiatrist was charging her father $50 a session to treat her for a condition that he diagnosed as psychological frigidity. She would shiver violently every time she came within touching distance of a possible boyfriend. Well, I think the psychiatrist misunderstood her shivers. Isabel. She might have shivered because of Ralph. That's what I mean. Why, the night I met her, I heard a noise like castanets at a distance. I thought some Spanish dancers were about to come on. Then I noticed her teeth. She had buck teeth at that time, which were later extracted. Were chattering together, and her whole body was uncontrollably shaking. Isabel. We both married into the shakes. But Mr. Bates, I don't think it's very nice of you to ridicule the appearance of your wife. Ralph. Oh, I'm not. Isabel. You were. Ralph. At my suggestion, she had the buck teeth extracted. It was like kissing a rock pile before the extractions, I swear. Isabel. Mr. Bates. Ralph. This snow almost feels warm as white ashes out of a chimney. Isabel. Excuse me, I'll get my sweater. She goes in. He remains on the little paved terrace. When she comes out again in her cardigan, he goes on talking as if there'd been no interruption. Ralph. Yep, her old man was paying this head shrinker $50 per session for this condition he diagnosed as psychological frigidity. I cured her of that completely almost overnight. But at 37, my age, you ain't middle-aged, but you're in the shadow of it. And it's a spooky shadow. I mean, when you look at late middle-aged couples like the McGillicuddies, my absent wife's parents, Isabel. Mr. Bates, don't you think I should go downtown and take a hotel room? Even if George comes back, he ought not to find me here like a checked package waiting for him to return with a claim check. Because if you give up your pride, what are you left with, really? She turns and goes back inside. He follows her in. Immediately after they enter, a girl appears on the terrace. Don't you agree, Mr. Bates? The girl rings the doorbell. Ralph. Here he is now, you see? Isabel, who had sunk onto a hassock before the fireplace, now rises tensely as Ralph calls out. Come on in, lover boy. That door ain't locked. Ralph opens the door. Oh, what can I do you for, Susie? Susie comes into the room with a sheepish grin. Susie. Excuse me for coming to the front door, Mr. Bates, but the snow's wet and I got a hole in my shoe. Ralph. You alone? Susie. Yes, sir. Ralph. They sent you for something? Susie. Yes, sir. They sent me for the child Santa Claus. Ralph. Oh, they did, huh? Well, you go right back and tell the McGillicuddies that the child Santa Claus is staying right here till the child comes over for it. Because I bought it, not them. And I am at least half responsible for the child's existence also. Tell them the child did not come into the world without a father, and it's about time for the child to acknowledge that fact. And for them to acknowledge that fact. And how did you get here, Susie? Susie. Charlie brought me. Ralph. Who's Charlie? Susie. Charlie's the new chauffeur, Mr. Bates. Ralph. I'll tell my wife and her folks, the McGillicuddies, that I won't be here tomorrow, but the child Santa Claus will be here under the tree. And say that I said Merry Christmas. Can you remember all that? Susie. Yes, sir. She turns and shouts through the door. Charlie. Don't come up. I'm coming right down, Charlie. The sound of a Cadillac motor starting is heard below the terrace as Susie leaves. Ralph looks out of the open door until the car is gone, then slams it shut. Ralph. Dig that, will ya? Sent a colored girl over to collect the kids' Christmas. This is typical of the Stuart McGillicuddies. I'd like to have seen Mr. Stuart McGillicuddy. The look on his face when that Western Union messenger gave him my message of resignation this afternoon, and he was at last exposed to my true opinions of him. Isabel. You should have let her take the child's Christmas to it. Ralph. They'll be over. Don't worry. And I will be waiting for them with both barrels, man. Will I blast them? Think of the psychiatrist fees that I saved her fathead father. I even made her think that she was attractive. And over a 5-year period got one pay raise when she gave birth to my son, which she has turned to a sissy. Isabel hasn't listened to his speech. Isabel. I thought that was George at the door. Ralph. That's life for you. Isabel. What? Ralph. I said, isn't that life for you? Isabel. What is life for us all? She sighs. My philosophy professor at the Baptist college I went to, he said one day, we are all of us born, live and die in the shadow of a giant question mark that refers to 3 questions. Where do we come from? Why? And where, oh where, are we going? Ralph. When did you say you got married? Isabel. Yesterday. Yesterday morning. Ralph. That lately? Well, he'll be back before you can say Joe Blow. He appreciates her neat figure again. Isabel. What? Ralph. Nothing. Isabel. Well? Ralph. Do you like Christmas music? Isabel. Everything but White Christmas. As she extends her palms to the imaginary fireplace, Ralph is standing a little behind her, still looking her up and down with solemn appreciation. Ralph. Aw, you don't like White Christmas? Isabel. The radio in that car is practically the only thing in it that works. We had it on all the time. She gives a little tired laugh. Conversation was impossible, even if there had been a desire to talk. It kept playing White Christmas because it was snowing, I guess, all the way down here yesterday and today. Ralph. A radio in a funeral limousine? Isabel. I guess they just played it on the way back from the graveyard. Anyway, once I reached over and turned the volume down. He didn't say anything, he just reached over and turned the volume back up. Isn't it funny how a little thing like that can be so insulting to you? Then I started crying, and still haven't stopped. I pretended to be looking out the car window till it got dark. Ralph. You're just going through a little period of adjustment to each other. Isabel. What do you do with a bride left on your doorstep, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Well, I'd never had that experience. Isabel. Before? Well, now you're faced with it. I hope you know how to handle it. You know why I know he's left me? He only took in my bags. He left his own in the car. He brought in all of mine except my little blue zipper overnight bag. That he kept for some reason. Perhaps he intends to pick up another female companion who could use its contents. Ralph. Little lady, you're in a bad state of nerves. Isabel. Have you ever been so tired that you don't know what you're doing or saying? Ralph. Yes, often. Isabel. That's my condition. So make allowances for it. Yes, indeed, that sure is a mighty far drugstore. She wanders back to the window and parts the curtain to peer out. Ralph. He seems gone twice as long because you're thinking about it. Isabel. I don't know why I should care, except for my overnight bag with my toilet articles in it. Ralph, obliquely investigating. Where did you spend last night? Isabel, vaguely. Where did we spend last night? Ralph. Yeah, where did you stop for the night? Isabel, rubbing her forehead and sighing with perplexity. In a tourist camp called the Old Man River Motel? Yes, the Old Man River Motel. Ralph. That's a mistake. The first night ought to be spent in a real fine place, regardless of what it cost you. It's so important to get off on the right foot. He has freshened his drink and come around to the front of the bar. She has gone back to the window at the sound of a car. If you get off on the wrong foot, it can take a long time to correct it. She nods in slow confirmation of this opinion. Walls are built up between people a hell of a damn sight faster than broken down. You want me to give you my word that he's coming back? I will. I'll give you my word. Hey. He snaps his fingers. Had he brought me a Christmas present? If not, that's what he's doing. That explains where he's went to. There's a pause. She sits sadly by the fireplace. What went wrong last night? Isabel. Let's not talk about that. Ralph. I don't mean to pry into such a private, intimate thing, but... Isabel. No, let's don't. I'll just put it this way, and perhaps you will understand me. In spite of my being a student nurse, till discharge, my experience has been limited, Mr. Bates. Perhaps it's because I grew up in a small town, an only child, too protected. I wasn't allowed to date till my last year at high, and then my father insisted on meeting the boys I went out with, and laid down pretty strict rules, such as when to bring me home from parties and so forth. If he smelled the liquor on the breath of a boy at the door, that boy would not enter, and that little rule ruled out a goodly number. Ralph. I bet it did. They should have ate peanuts before they called for you, honey. He chuckles, reflectively poking at the fire. That's what we done at the Sisters of Mercy Orphans Home in Mobile. Isabel, touched. Oh, were you an orphan, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Yes, I had that advantage. He slides off the high stool again to poke at the fire. She picks up the antique bellows and fans the flames, crouching beside him. Isabel. So were you an orphan? People that grow up orphans, don't they value love more? Ralph. Well, let's put it this way. They get it less easy. To get it, they have to give it. So, yeah, they do value it more. He slides back onto the bar stool. She crouches at the fireplace to fan the fire with the bellows. The flickering light brightens their shy, tender faces. Isabel. But it's also an advantage to have a parent like my daddy. She's again close to tears. Very strict, but devoted. Opposed to me going into the nursing profession, but I had my heart set on it. I thought I had a vocation. I saw myself as a Florence Nightingale nurse, a lamp in her hand, establishing clinics in the upper Amazon country. She laughs a little ruefully. Yes, I had heroic daydreams about myself as a dedicated young nurse working side by side with a. She pauses shyly. Ralph. With a dedicated young doctor? Isabel. No, the doctor would be older. Well, not too old, but older. I saw myself passing among the pallets. You know, the straw mats, administering to the plague victims in the jungle, exposing myself to contagion. She exhibits a bit of humor here. Ralph, catching it? Isabel. Yes, contracting it eventually myself. Ralph. What were the symptoms of it? Isabel. A slight blemish appearing on the hands. She gives him a daring smile. A darting smile. Ralph, joining in the fantasy with her. Which you'd wear gloves to conceal? Isabel. Yes, rubber gloves all the time. Ralph. A crusty looking blemish or more like a fungus? They laugh together. Isabel. I don't think I. Yes, I did. I imagined it being like a scales, like silver fish scales appearing on my hands and then progressing gradually to the wrists and forearms. Ralph. And the young doctor discovering you were concealing this condition? Isabel. The youngish middle aged doctor, Mr. Bates. Yes, discovering I had contracted the plague myself. And then a big scene in which she says, "Oh no, you mustn't touch me." But he seizes her passionately in his arms, of course, and exposes himself to contagion. Ralph chuckles heartily, getting off stool to poke at the fire again. She joins him on the floor to fan the flames with the bellows. Isabel. And love is stronger than death. You get the picture? Ralph. Yep, I've seen the picture. Isabel. We've had a good laugh together. You're a magician, Ralph, to make me laugh tonight in my present situation. George and I never laugh. We never laugh together. Oh, he makes jokes, yes, but we never have a real genuine laugh together. And that's a bad sign, I think. Because I don't think a married couple can go through life without laughs together any more than they can without tears. Ralph. Nope. He removes his shoes. Take your slippers off, honey. Isabel. I have the funniest sensation in the back of my head, like Ralph. Like a tightrope was coming unknotted? Isabel. Exactly. Like a tightrope was being unknotted. He removes her slippers and puts them on the hearth, crosses into the bedroom, and comes out with a pair of fluffy pink bedroom slippers. He crouches beside her and feels the sole of her stocking. Ralph. Yep, damp. Take those damp stockings off. Isabel, unconsciously following the suggestion. Does George have a sense of humor, in your opinion? Has he got the ability to laugh at himself and at life and at human situations? Outside at off-color jokes? In your opinion, Mr. Bates? Ralph, taking the damp stockings from her and hanging them over the footlights. Yes, we had some good laughs together, me and George. Isabel. We never had any together. Ralph. That's the solemnity of romantic love, little lady. I mean, like Romeo and Juliet was not exactly a joke book. Isabel. The solemnity of romantic love. I wouldn't expect an old war buddy of George's to use an expression like that. Ralph. Let me put these on your feet, little lady. She sighs and extends her feet, and he slips the soft, fleecy pink slippers on them. But you know something? I'm going to tell you something which isn't out of the joke books either. You got a wonderful boy in your hands, on your hands. They don't make him any better than him, and I mean it. He does. Isabel. I appreciate your loyalty to an old war buddy. Ralph. Nah. It's not just that. Isabel. But if they don't make him any better than George Haverstick, they ought to stop making him. They ought to cease producing. She utters a sort of wild, sad laugh, which stops as abruptly as it started. Suddenly, she observes the bedroom slippers on her feet. What's these? Where did they come from? Ralph. Honey, I just put 'em on you. Didn't you know? Isabel. How strange. I wasn't at all aware of it. They are both a little embarrassed. Where is your wife, Mr. Bates? Ralph. Honey, I told you she quit me and went home to her folks. Isabel. Oh, excuse me, I remember. You told me. Suddenly, the blazing logs make a sharp cracking noise. A spark apparently has spit out of the grate onto Isabel's skirt. She gasps and springs up, retreating from the fireplace, and Ralph jumps off the bar stool to brush at her skirt. Under the material of the Angora wool skirt is the equal and warmer softness of her young body. Ralph is abruptly embarrassed, coughs, turns back to the fireplace, and picks up copper tongs to shift the position of the crackling logs. This is a moment between them that must be done just right to avoid misinterpretation. Ralph would never make a play for the bride of a buddy. What should come out of the moment is not a suggestion that he will or might, but that Dottie's body never felt that way. He remembers bodies that did. What comes out of Isabel's reaction is a warm understanding of his warm understanding. Just that. Nothing more at all. Isabel. Thank you. This Angora wool is highly inflammable stuff. At least I would think it might be. Ralph. Yeah, and I don't want George to come back here and find a toasted marshmallow bride by my fireplace. They sit down rather self-consciously. Ralph on the high stool, Isabel on the low hassock. Isabel. Yes. Ralph. Huh? Isabel. Daddy opposed me going into nursing so much that he didn't speak to me. Wouldn't even look at me for a whole week before I took off for St. Louis. Ralph. Aw? Shh. Isabel. However, at the last moment, just before the train pulled out of the depot, he came stalking up the platform to the coach window with a gift package and an envelope. The package contained flannel nighties, and the envelope had in it a list of moral instructions in the form of prayers, such as, "O Heavenly Father, give thy weak daughter strength to..." She giggles. "Resist them." She covers her mouth with a hand to suppress a spasm of laughter. Oh, my lord. Well, you would have to know Daddy to appreciate the... Ralph. Honey, I reckon I know your daddy. That's what I meant about the orphan's advantage, honey. They laugh together. Isabel. We sure do have some good laughs together, Mr. Bates. Now, where did I get these? She means the bedroom slippers. These aren't mine. Oh, yes, you. They resume their grave contemplation of the fire. Heavenly Father, give thy weak daughter the strength of will to resist the lusts of men. Amen. Ralph chuckles sadly. And I was never tempted not to, resist them. Till George. Ralph. Did George arouse Isabel? I don't suppose another man could see George the way I saw him. So handsome and so afflicted and handsome, with that mysterious tremor, with those shakes. Ralph. How did George come on? Isabel. Huh? Oh no, I don't mean he came on like a Ralph. Bull? Exactly? Isabel. No, 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 no. It was very strange. Very strange. Ralph. What? Isabel. He always wanted us to go out on double dates or with a whole bunch of others. And when we were alone, together, there was a very odd sort of timidity between us. And that, of course, is what touched me. Oh, that touched me. There is a pause in the talk. Ralph descends from his high perch and passes behind her low hassock with a smile behind her back, which is a recognition of the truth of her romantic commitment to George. This is also in the slight tender pat that he gives to the honey-colored crown of her head. And so, although I had many strong opportunities to give in to my weakness on weekend dates with young interns and doctors at Barnes, I was never tempted to do so. But with George, Ralph, you did? Give in? Isabel. Mr. Bates, George Haverstick married a virgin, and I can't say for sure that it was my strength of will and not his that deserves the credit. Ralph returns to the fireplace with beer. Ralph. Yeah, well, now I'm going to tell you something about that boy that might surprise you after your experience last night at the Old Man River Motel. He opens a beer can. He always bluffs about his ferocious treatment of women. Believe me, to hear him talk, you'd think he spared them no pity. However, I happen to know that he didn't come on as strong with those dolls in Tokyo Kong and Korea as he liked to pretend to. Because I heard from those dolls. He'd just sit up there on a pillow and drink that rice wine with them and teach them English. Then come downstairs from there, hitching his belt and shouting, "Oh man, oh brother," like he laid him to waste. Isabel. That was not his behavior in the Old Man River Motel last night. Ralph. What went wrong in the Old Man River Motel? Isabel. Too many men think that girls in the nursing profession must be shock-proof. I'm not. I wasn't last night. Ralph. Oh, was he drunk? Isabel. He'd been drinking all day in that heaterless retired funeral hack in a snowstorm to keep himself warm. Since I don't drink, I just had to endure it. Then, we stopped at the Old Man River Motel, as dreary a place as you could find on this earth. The electric heater in our cabin lit up but gave off no heat. Oh, George was comfortable there. Threw off his clothes and sat down in front of the heater as if I were not even present. Ralph. Aw. Isabel. Continuing drinking. Ralph. Aw. Isabel. Then began the courtship. And, oh, what a courtship it was. Such tenderness. Romance. I finally screamed. I locked myself in the bathroom and didn't come out till he had gotten to bed, and then I slept in a chair. Ralph. You wouldn't, Isabel. Mr. Bates, I just couldn't. The atmosphere just wasn't right, and she covers her face. I can't tell you more about it just now, except that it was a nightmare. Him in the bed, pretending to be asleep, and me in the chair pretending to be asleep too, and both of us knowing the other one wasn't asleep, and I can't tell you more about it right now. I just can't tell you more about than I've told you about it. Her sobs become violent, and there is a pause. Ralph. Hey, let me kiss the bride, huh? Can I kiss the bride? Isabel. You're very kind, Mr. Bates. I'm sure you were more understanding with your wife when you were going through this. Ralph. Period of adjustment? Yeah, that's all it is. It's just a little period of adjustment. He bestows a kiss on her tear stained cheek and a pat on her head. She squeezes his hand and sinks down again before the fireplace. Isabel. It isn't as if I'd given him to believe that I was experienced. I made it clear that I wasn't. He knows my background, and we talked at great length about my inhibitions, which I know are inhibitions, but which an understanding husband wouldn't expect his bride to overcome at once in a tourist cabin after a long, silent ride, in a funeral hack in a snowstorm with the heater not working in a shocked condition, having just been told that we were both unemployed and Ralph, little bit. You had a sleepless night in that motel. Why don't you put in a little sack time now? You need it, honey. Take Dottie's bed in there and think about nothing till morning. Isabel. You mean you know now that George is not coming back? Ralph. No, I mean that Dottie's not coming back. Isabel. I don't think you ever thought he would come back for me any more than I did. Ralph. Take Dottie's bed. Get some sleep on that foam rubber mattress while I sit here and watch the late, late show on TV. Isabel. But, Mr. Bates, if your wife does come back here, I wouldn't want her to find a stranger in your bedroom. Ralph. Honey, finding a stranger in the bedroom is far from being the biggest surprise of a lifetime. So you go on in there and lock the door. Isabel. Thank you, Mr. Bates. She enters bedroom. I'm only locking the door because of the slightest possibility that Mr. George Haverstick IV might come back drunk and try to repeat the comedy and tragedy of last night. I hope you realize that. Ralph. Oh, sure. Good night. Sleep tight, honey. She locks the bedroom door as Ralph returns to the fireplace. Ralph, to himself and to the audience. What a bitch of a Christmas. Curtain. Act 2. No time lapse. Isabel jumps up as a car is heard stopping out front. She looks wildly at Ralph, who gives her a nod and a smile as he crosses to the front door. Snow blows into the living room as he goes out and shouts, Ralph. Hey! Isabel catches her breath, waiting. Ha ha ha. Isabel expels her breath and sits down. Ralph, shouting through snow. Your wife thought she was deserted. George from a distance. Hey! Isabel springs up and rushes to a mirror to wipe away tears. A car door is heard slamming in front of the house. Isabel sits down. She immediately rises, rubbing her hands together, and then sits down again. Then she springs up and starts toward the bedroom, stops short as George enters. I'm the son of a camel, huh? My mother was a camel with 2 humps, a double-humped dromedary. George and Ralph catch each other in a big, rocking hug. Isabel stares, ignored, as the male greetings continue. Ralph. You old son of a tail gun. George. How's the young squirrel? Ralph. How's the Texas jackrabbit? There is a sudden incongruous stillness. They stare, all 3 of them, Isabel at George and Ralph at each other. George is suddenly embarrassed and says, George. Well, I see you still got your dog. Ralph. Yeah, my wife's folks are cat lovers. George. You'll get your wife back tomorrow. Ralph. Hell, I don't want her back. George. You don't want her back? Ralph. That's right. George. Hell, in that case, you won't be able to beat her off with a stick. His laugh expires as he catches Isabel's outraged look. Won't be able to beat her away from the door with a stick tomorrow. They stare at each other brightly with little chuckles, a constant series of little chuckles. Isabel feels ignored. Isabel. I doubt that Mr. Bates means it. George. Didn't you have didn't you all have a kid or of some kind? I don't remember if it was a boy or a girl. Isabel. The toys under the tree might give you a clue as to that. Ralph. Yeah, it's a boy, I guess. Drink? George. You bet. George goes to the bar and starts mixing drinks. Isabel. How old is your little boy? Ralph. 3 years old, and she's already made him a sissy. George. They'll do it every time, man. He keeps chuckling, as does Ralph. Ralph. I didn't want this kind of dog either. I wanted a Doberman Pinscher. A dog with some guts, not a whiner. But she wanted a poodle, and this flop-eared sad sack of a spaniel was a compromise, which turned out to be worse than a poodle. George. I'll bet you dollars to donuts your wife and kid'll be back here tomorrow. Ralph, in his slow drawl. They won't find me here if they do. I'm all packed to go. I would have been gone when you called, but I'm waiting to get a call from a boy about to get married. I want him to come over and make a cash offer on all this household stuff since I spent too much on Christmas and won't be around to collect my unemployment. George, come along with us. We got a big car out there and we're free as a breeze. Ain't that right, little bit? Isabel. Don't ask me what's right. I don't know. I do know, though, that couples with children don't separate at Christmas. And George, let your friend work out his problems himself. You don't know the situation and don't have any right to interfere in it. And now will you please go get my little blue zipper bag for me, please? Ralph, to George as if she hadn't spoken. No, I'm just going out to the Army airfield a couple miles down the highway and catch the first plane going west. George. We'll talk about that. Isabel. George. George. Aw, here, I forgot to give you your present. After driving almost back to Memphis to find a liquor store open. He extends a gift-wrapped magnum of champagne. Ralph. Lover Jesus, champagne? George. Imported and already cold. Ralph, glancing briefly at Isabel. Didn't I tell you that he was buying me something? She thought you deserted her, boy. Isabel. All right, I'll get it myself. I'll go out and get it out of the car myself. She rushes out into snow, leaving the door open. George closes the door without apparently noticing her exit. George. Boy, you and me have got a lot to talk over. Ralph. We sure got lots of territory to cover. George. So your goddamn marriage has cracked up on you, has it? Ralph. How's yours going so far? George. We'll talk about it later. Discuss it thoroughly. Later. Ralph. You got married yesterday morning? George. Yeah. Ralph. How was last night? George. We'll talk about that later, too. Isabel rushes into the room in outrage, panting. Isabel. I can't break the lock on that car. George. Little bit. I didn't know that you were born in a barn. He means she left the door open again. Isabel. I didn't know a lot about you either. George closes door. Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates. He turns toward her with a vague smile. The gentleman I married refuses to get my zipper bag out of the car or unlock the car so I can get it myself. The phone rings. Ralph picks it up. Ralph, in a slow, hoarse drawl at the phone. Aw, hi, Smokey. I'm glad you got my message. Look, I quit Regal Dairy Products and I'm flying out of here late tonight or early tomorrow morning. And I thought maybe you might like to look over some of my stuff here. The household equipment. And make me a cash offer for it. I'll take less in cash than a check since I'm not going to stop at the coast. I'm flying straight through to Hong Kong, so it would be difficult for me to cash you a check, and of course I expect to make a sacrifice on the stuff here. Hey, would you like a beaverskin coat? Sheared beaverskin coat for Gertrude? Aw, I'll let you have it for a third off. Aw, Well, anyhow, come over right away, Smokey, and make me an offer in cash on as much of this household stuff as you figure that you could use when you get married. Okay? He hangs up. George. Hong Kong. Ralph. Yeah, George. Well, how about that? Back to Miss Lotus Blossom in the Pavilion of Joys? Ralph. I never had it so good. At least, not since. Isabel, acidly. Mr. Bates, your character has changed since my gypsy husband appeared. He seems to have had an immediate influence on you and not a good one. May I wash up in your bathroom? They both look at her with slight enigmatic smiles. Ralph. What's that, honey? Isabel. Will you let me use your bathroom? Ralph. Aw, sure, honey. I'm sorry, George. Now what's the matter with her? He turns to Isabel. Now what's the matter with you? Isabel. May I talk to you alone in another room? Ralph. You all go on in the bedroom and straighten things out. Ralph goes out into the snow flurry. George leads Isabel into the next room. George. Now what's the matter with you? Isabel. Is this a sample of how I'm going to be treated? George. What do you mean? How have I treated you, huh? Isabel. I might as well not be present. For all the attention I have been paid since you and your buddy had this tender reunion? George. Aren't you being a little unreasonable, honey? Isabel. I don't think so. George, if you are unhappy, our marriage can still be annulled. You know that, don't you? George. You want to get out of it, do you? Ralph comes back in with her traveling case. He sets it down and goes to the kitchenette. Isabel. I don't think it's really very unreasonable of me to want to be treated as if I existed. George. Will you quit acting like a spoiled little bitch? I want to tell you something. You're the first woman that ever put me down. Sleeping last night in a chair? What kind of basis is that for a happy marriage? Isabel. You had to get drunk on a highway. In a heaterless funeral car after informing me you had just quit your job. Blasting my eardrums afterward with a car radio you wouldn't let me turn down. How was I supposed to react to such kindness? Women are human beings, and I'm not an exception to that rule, I assure you. I hated you last night after you had been hating me and torturing me all day long. Ralph comes back into the front room. George. Torturing you, did you say? Why don't you simmer down? We ain't alone here, you know. Ralph, quietly from the living room. You all are just going through a perfectly usual little period of adjustment. That's all it is, I told her. George. Aw, you all have been talking? Isabel. What did you think we've been doing while you were gone in that instrument of torture you have for a car? George. You've got to simmer down to a lower boiling point, baby. Ralph, entering the bedroom. Just going through a period of adjustment. Isabel. Adjustment to what, Mr. Bates? Humiliation? For the rest of my life? Well, I won't have it. I don't want such an adjustment. I want to... May I... She sobs. Freshen up a little bit in your bathroom before we drive downtown to check in at a hotel. Ralph. Sure you can. George. I ain't going downtown or checking in no hotel. He goes back into the living room. Isabel. You may do as you please. I'm checking in a hotel. Ralph, offering her a glass. You never finished your drink. Isabel. I don't care to, thanks. Too many people think that liquor solves problems, all problems. I think all it does is confuse them. Ralph. I would say that it obfuscates them a little, but Isabel. Does what to them, Mr. Bates? Ralph. I work crossword puzzles. I pick up a lot of long words. Obfuscates means obscures. And problems need obfuscation now and then, honey. I don't mean total or permanent obfuscation. I just mean temporary obfuscation. He is touched by the girl and he is standing close to her, still holding the glass out toward her. He has a fine, simple sweetness and gentleman when he's not bugged by people. Do you always say Mr. to men? Isabel. Yes, I do till I know them. I had an old-fashioned upbringing and I can't say I regret it. Yes? She is still peering out the door at her new husband. Ralph. I wish you would say Ralph to me like you know me, honey. You got a tension between you and tensions obfuscate love. Why don't you get that cross look off your face and give him a loving expression? Obfuscate his problems with a sweet smile on your face and... Isabel. You do that. I'm not in the mood to obfuscate his problems, Mr. Bates. I think he'd do better to face them like I'm facing mine. Such as the problem of having married a man that seems to dislike me after one day of marriage. Ralph. Finish his drink and obfuscate that problem because it doesn't exist. He closes the bedroom door. As he comes back to Isabel with the glass, George reopens the door between the two rooms, glares in for a moment and switches the overhead light on, and then goes back into the parlor. Ralph smiles tolerantly at this show of distrust, which is not justified. Isabel. You have a sweet little bedroom, Mr. Bates. Ralph. I married a sweet, homely woman. Almost started to like her. I can like anybody, but... Isabel. Mr. Bates. Ralph. This house has a sweetness about it. Ralph. You don't think it's tacky? Isabel. No. I think it's sweet. Ralph. We got it cheap because this section of town is built right over a cavern. Isabel, without listening. What? Ralph. This High Point suburb is built over an underground cavern and is gradually sinking down in it. You see those cracks in the walls? Isabel. Oh. She hasn't listened to him or looked. Oh, my little blue bag. May I have it? Ralph through the door. She wants a little blue bag. George. Here, give it to her, God damn it. He tosses the bag into the bedroom. Isabel screams. Ralph catches the bag. Now what you screaming for? Isabel. Thank heaven Mr. Bates is such a good catch. All my colognes and perfumes are in that bag, including a $25 bottle of Valdenue. Mr. Bates, will it be necessary for me to phone the hotel? George. Didn't you hear what I said? Isabel. Mr. Bates, would you mind phoning some clean, inexpensive hotel to hold a room for us tonight? George. I said I'm not going to check in a hotel tonight. Isabel. Reserve a single room, please. Ralph. Sure, honey, I'll do that. Now you just rest and freshen up and... Come on, George, let her alone now so she can rest and calm down. He leads George back into the parlor. George. Look at my hands. Will you look at my hands? Ralph, what about your hands? George. Remember that tremor, which I had in Korea, those shakes, which started in Korea? Ralph. Oh, has it come back on you? George. Are you blind, man? Ralph. Yeah. How's your drink? George. She in the bathroom yet? Ralph. Nah, she's still in the bedroom. George. Wait till she gets in the bathroom so we can talk. Ralph. What's your drink, old son? George. Beer's fine. Jesus. Ralph at the bar. Rough? George. Just wait till she gets in the bathroom so I can tell you about it last night. Ralph. Here. He hands him a beer. George at the bedroom door. She's still sitting there bawling on that bed. Step outside a minute. He goes to the front door and out onto the tiny paved porch. The interior dims as Ralph follows him out. For a while they just stand drinking beer with the snow shadows swarming about them. Ralph. Chilly. George. I don't feel chilly. Ralph. I do. He pauses. You're not for that little lady in that damn silly little sissy mess of a bedroom. George. What's wrong with the bedroom? It looked like a nice little bedroom. Ralph. A bedroom is just as nice as whoever sleeps in it with you. George. I missed that. What was that now? He rests an arm on Ralph's shoulders. Ralph. How would you like every time you went to bed with your wife, you had to imagine on the bed in the dark that it wasn't her on it with you, in the dark with you, but any one of a list of 1,000 or so lovely lays. I done a despicable thing. I married a girl that had no attraction for me except and I felt sorry for her and her old man's money. I got what I should have gotten. Nothing. Just a goddamn desk job at Regal Dairy Products. One of her daddy's business operations in Memphis at 85 lousy rotten dollars a week. With my background in the Air Force. George. Man, an air record will cut you no ice on the ground. All it leaves you is a mysterious tremor. Come on back in. I'm freezing to death out here. I'll get her into the bathroom so we can talk. He tosses the beer cans into the yard. Ralph, don't you know better than to throw beer cans in a man's front yard? He says this vaguely, glumly, as he follows George back into the cottage and shuts the door behind him. George goes to the bedroom. George, entering. Little bit, you told me you couldn't wait to get under a good hot shower. There's a good shower in that bathroom. Why don't you go and get under that good hot shower? Isabel. I have a lot to think over, George. George. Think it over under a good shower in that bedroom, will you? I want to take a bath, too. Isabel, suddenly turning to face him from the bed. George, I feel so lonely. George. Yeah, and whose fault is that? Isabel. I don't know why I suddenly felt so lonely. She sobs again. He regards her coolly from the door. George. Little bit, go in the bathroom and take your shower so I can go take mine. Or do you want us to go in and take one together? She rises with a sigh and goes to the bathroom door. Nah, I didn't think so. She enters the bathroom. He waits till the shower starts, then returns to the front room. There now, she's in. He shakes both fists in the air with a grimace of torment. Look! I got to get rid of that girl. I got to get rid of her quick. Jesus, you gotta help me. I can't stay with that girl. Ralph. Man, you're married to her. George. You're married to one. Where's yours? You son of a tail gun. Don't tell me I'm married to her when we exchanged 5 remarks with each other since we drove out of Cape Girardeau, where she refused to... Has she come out of the bathroom? No. Even undress, but huddled up in a chair all night in a blanket crying. Because she had the misfortune to be my wife? Ralph. I wouldn't count on it. George. On what? Ralph. Her thinking it's such a misfortune? George. I described to you how we passed the night last night. Ralph. Is this girl a virgin? George. She is a cast iron virgin, and's gonna stay one, determined. Ralph. I wouldn't count on that. George. I would. I'd count on it. First thing I do tomorrow is pack her onto a plane back to St. Louis. Ralph. You must have done something to shock her. George. That's the truth. I tried to sleep with her. Ralph. Maybe you handled the little lady too rough. George. Now don't talk to me like a wise old man of the mountain about how to deal with a woman. Who was it had to make dates for who at Big Springs, and who was it even had to make arrangements for you with those Tokyo dolls? Ralph. That's not a woman, that's Gash. George. Gash are women. Ralph. They are used women. You've got an unused woman and got to approach her as one. George. She's going to stay unused as far as I'm concerned. He stoops by the Christmas tree. Now what the hell is this thing? He is crouched among the toys under the tree. Ralph. Rocket launcher. Miniature of the rocket launching pad at Cape Canaveral. George. No snow? How's it work? Ralph. Give me the countdown, I'll show you. George. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. Ow! The rocket has fired in his face. Ralph. Ain't you got sense enough to stand clear of a rocket launcher? Just last week, I caught the little bugger playing with a rag doll. Well, I snatched that doll away from him and pitched it into the fireplace. He tried to pull out and burned his hand. Dottie called me a monster. The child screamed, "I hate you," and kicked my shins black and blue. But I'll be damned if any son of a Ralph Bates will grow up playing with dolls. Why, I'll bet you he rides this Hawes side saddle. Now, a sissy tendency on a boy's got to be nipped in the bud. Otherwise, the bud'll blossom. George. I would prefer to have a little girl. He says this wistfully, still rubbing his bruised forehead. Little girls prefer daddy. Female instinct comes out early in them. Ralph. I wanted a boy, but I'm not sure I got one. However, I got him a real red-blooded boy's Christmas at no small expense for a man in my income bracket. Isabel comes out of the bathroom. I like the kid. I mean, I sure would suffer worse than he would if the neighborhood gang called him sissy. I'm tolerant by nature, but if I get partial custody of the kid, even 1 month in summer, I will correct the sissy tendency in him. Because in this world, you got to be what your physical sex is or correct it in Denmark. I mean, we got a man's world coming up. Man, technical, terrific. It's got to be fearless, terrific. Isabel. Mr. Bates? George, on his way to the door. What do you want? Isabel. I called for Mr. Bates. George. Mr. Bates, Mrs. Haverstick is anxious to talk to you, sir. Isabel. I just want to know if you called the hotel. Ralph, entering. Sure, honey. Don't worry about a thing. Everything's going to be fine. Isabel. She is in a silk robe. Thanks, Ralph. You've been awfully kind to me. Oh, I helped myself to a little Pepto-Bismol I found in your sweet little bathroom. Ralph. Oh, that pink stuff? Take it all. I never touch it. It's Dorothea's. She used to get acid stomach. Isabel. It's very soothing. George crosses to the bedroom door, head cocked, somewhat suspicious. Ralph. Well, I cured her of that. I doubt she's hit the Pepto-Bismol bottle once in the last 5 years. Isabel. I rarely suffer from an upset stomach. Rarely as snow in Memphis. She laughs lightly. But the human stomach is an emotional barometer with some people. Some get headaches. Others get upset stomachs. Ralph. Some even get diarrhea. Isabel. The combination of nervous strain and... Oh, what's this? She picks up a gorgeously robed statue of the infant Jesus. Ralph. That. He moves farther into the bedroom. George moves closer to the door. That's the infant of Prague. Prague, Czechoslovakia? Isabel. Oh? Ralph. It was discovered there in the ruins of an old monastery. It has miraculous properties. Isabel. Does it? Ralph. They say it does. Whoever gives you the infant of Prague gives you a piece of money to put underneath it for luck. Her father presented this infant to Dorothea, so the piece of money was naturally 1 penny. It's supposed to give you prosperity if you're not prosperous, and a child if you're childless. It gave us a child, but the money is yet to come in. The money's just been going out. However, I don't blame the infant of Prague for that because... Isabel. Mr. Bates? Ralph. You know, very often people can be absolutely blind, stupid, and helpless about their own problems, and still have a keen institution about the problems of others. Ralph. Yeah. Isabel. There is such a tender atmosphere in this sweet little house, especially this little bedroom. You can almost touch it, feel it. I mean, you can breathe the tender atmosphere in it. Ralph, in a slow, sad drawl. The color scheme in this bedroom is battleship gray. And will you notice the cute inscriptions on the twin beds? His on this one, hers on that one. The linens marked his and hers too. Well, the space between the two beds was no man's land for a while. Her psychological frigidity was like a artillery barrage between his and hers. I didn't try to break through it the first few nights. Nope. I said to myself, let her make the first move. Isabel. Did she? Ralph. What do you think? Isabel. I think she did. Ralph. Right you are. He gives her a little congratulatory pat on the shoulder. George. What's this heart-to-heart talking going on in here? Ralph, chuckling. Come on out here, boy. I got something to tell you. He leads George out. George. What were you up to in there? Ralph, whispering loudly. Go in there quick before she gets dressed, you fool. George. I'll be damned if I will. Ralph. I'll turn the TV on loud. Isabel, calling out. I'll be dressed in a jiffy. Ralph. Go on. You've got just a jiffy. George. Yeah, and I've got some pride, too. She put me down last night. First woman ever to put me down. And Ralph. I know you told me. Go in. Lock the door. And George. You go in. That's what you want to do. I never had a girl yet that you didn't want to take over. This time you're welcome. Go in. Go back in and breathe the tender atmosphere of that. Ralph. George? Hey, you're shaken, man. You're shaken to pieces. What kind of son of a bitch do you take me for? George. The kind which you are, which you've always been. Ralph. She is right about you. You are not well, son. George. Where'd you get this son stuff? Don't call me son. Ralph. And grow up, will ya? What's your drink? Same? George. Same. Ralph. You're shaken. Because you want to go in that bedroom. Go in. Take the bottle with you. I'll sit here and watch TV till... Isabel has put on her traveling suit. She comes into the living room. Too late now. Isabel, in a sweet Texas drawl. Mr. Bates, Ralph. Breaks my heart to see all those lovely child's toys under the tree and the little boy not here to have his Christmas. Ralph. He's with his mother. Isabel. I know, but his Christmas is here. Ralph. He's a mama's boy. He's better off with his mama. Isabel. How are you feeling now, George? George grunts and turns to the bar. Isabel makes a despairing gesture to Ralph. George wheels about abruptly, suspecting some dumb play. Isabel laughs lightly and then sighs deeply. George. I thought you'd set your heart on a single hotel room tonight. Isabel. George, you're shaken worse than I've ever seen you. George. That's not your problem. That's my problem, not yours. Ralph to Isabel. Honey, come here a minute. He whispers something to her. Isabel. Oh, no. No. Mr. Bates, you are confusing the function of a wife with that of a... I feel sorry. I feel very sorry for you, not so young men who've depended for love, for tenderness in your lives, on the sort of women available near army camps and occupied territories. Mr. Bates? Ralph? Ralph. Just take his hand and lead him into the... Isabel. Ralph, no. Believe me. Ralph. All right. There is a pause. Isabel. Ralph, why did you quit your job? Did you get the shakes too? George. Don't get bitchy with him. Isabel. I wasn't being bitchy. Ralph. She wasn't being bitchy. She asked a logical question. Isabel. Just a question. George. Can't you mind your own business for a change? You got fired too, don't forget. All three of us here is jobless. Isabel. I am not forgetting. Primly with dignity. I am not forgetting a thing. And I have a lot to remember. George. Good. I hope you remember it. Memorize it. He is getting tight. Isabel, sniffling a little. I think I caught a cold in that car. Overlapping, barely intelligible. George. Hell, you were born with a cold. Isabel, stop that. George. Damn little Isabel. Mr. Bates, make him stop. Ralph, let him blow off some steam. George. Incurable cold. You didn't catch it from me. Isabel. I wish you had shown this side of your nature before. Just a hint. Just a clue so I'd have known what I was in for. George. What hint did you give me? What clue did I have to your nature? Isabel. Did I disguise my nature? George. You sure in hell did. Isabel. In what way? Tell me, please. George. You didn't put the freeze on me at Barnes Hospital. To Ralph. She was nurse at Barnes when I went there for those tests to find out the cause of my shakes. She was my night nurse at Barnes. Isabel. Oh, stop. Don't be so crude. How can you be so crude? George. She was my night nurse at Barnes and gave me alcohol rub-downs at bedtime. Isabel. That was my job. I had to. George. Hell, she stroked and petted me with her hands like she had on a pair of silk gloves. Isabel. This is insufferable. I'm going downtown. She covers her face, sobbing. Just give me the car fare downtown. George. You remember those dolls with silk gloves on their hands in Tokyo, Ralph? Hell, she could have given them a Jap doll's lessons. Isabel. I did not touch your body except as a nurse hired to do it. You know I didn't. I did not touch your big old lecherous body. George. How'd you give me a rub down without touching my body, huh? How could you give me rub downs without touching my body, huh? Isabel. Please. Please make him be still. Mr. Bates. You believe me. He's making out like I seduced him while I was his nurse. George. I didn't say that. Don't say I said that. I didn't say that. I said you had soft little fingers and you knew what you were doing. She'd say, turn over. I couldn't turn over. I had to stay on my stomach. I was embarrassed not to. Isabel. Ugh, I feel nauseated. What filth have you in your mind? Ralph. Honey, little lady, come over and sit here with me. All this will all straighten out. It's going to be all straightened out. George pours himself a drink. The glass slips out of his shaking fingers. George. Worse than ever? Worse than ever before? How could I have kept that job? A ground mechanic with hands that can't hold tools. Isabel. Take your tranquilizers. They're in my zipper bag. George. Oh, Jesus. Ralph, picking up the dropped glass. See, honey, that boy isn't well. Make some allowances for him. You're both nice kids, both of you. Wonderful people. And very good-looking people. I'm afraid you're doomed to be happy for a long time together, soon as this little period of adjustment that you're going through right now passes over. George holds his violently shaking hands in front of him, staring at them fiercely. He goes to the bedroom. Isabel. May I call my father? Collect. Ralph. Don't call home now. Why upset the old people on Christmas Eve? Isabel. I'll just say I miss them and want to come home for Christmas. Ralph. They'll know something's wrong if you go home without your brand new husband. Isabel. Husband? What husband? The man who describes me as a Tokyo whore? Implies that I seduced him in a hospital because I was required to give him alcohol rub-downs at night? Ralph. All he meant was you excited him, honey. Isabel. I assure you that was not my intention. I am naturally gentle. I am gentle by nature, and if my touch on his big, lecherous body created sexual fantasies in his mind, that's hardly my fault, is it? George, returning. I'm sorry that I upset you. Isabel. Will you tell him the truth? George. Sure I will. What about? What about? Isabel. Did I deliberately excite you at Barnes Hospital? George. No, I never said that. Isabel. Anybody that heard you would get that impression. George. You didn't deliberately do it. You just did it because I was horny for you, that's all. That's all. That's all. He slumps in a chair with a long, despairing sigh. There is a silent pause. Isabel. I don't blame you alone, George. I blame myself, too. Not for a deliberate sexual provocation, but for not realizing before our marriage yesterday that we were opposite types. George, sadly. Yeah, opposite types. Isabel. I want to talk to my father. George. Talk to him. Call him. I'll pay Ralph the charges. Isabel. May I? Ralph. Sure, honey. Call your folks and wish them a Merry Christmas. Isabel. Thank you. I will if I can stop crying. Ralph. George, this little girl needs you. Go on. Be nice to her, boy. George. I need somebody too. She hasn't got the incurable shakes I have. I got 'em. Was she nice to me last night? Isabel, tearfully. Operator, I want to call long distance. Sweetwater, Texas. 0703. No, anybody that answers. It will be Daddy. Mama can't get out of the... She sobs. Bed. Ralph makes a sign to George to go over and sit by her. George disregards the suggestion. Ralph. You better hang up and let them call you back. Long distance is very busy on Christmas Eve. Everyone calling the home folks. Isabel. I just hope I stop crying. I don't want Daddy to hear me. She pauses. Poor old thing. So sweet and faithful to Mama. Bedridden with arthritis for 7 years now. Hello? What? Oh. You'll call me back when you complete the connection. Will you? Because it's very important. It's really very urgent. She hangs up. There is silence. Ralph, finally. One bad night in a Rutten Highway motel, and you all are acting like born enemies toward each other. George. Don't upset her. She's going to talk to her daddy and tell him she's married to a stinker. Isabel. No, I'm not. I'm going to tell him that I am blissfully happy. Married to the kindest man in the world. The second kindest. The kindest man next to my daddy. George. Thanks. Isabel. Waits hand and foot on Mama, bedridden with arthritis. George. You told Ralph about that? Isabel. And has held down a job in a pharmacy all these years. George. Wonderful. I didn't expect to marry a girl in love with her father. Isabel. George Haverstick, you are truly a monster. The phone rings. She snatches it up. What? Dad? Oh, precious Daddy. She bursts into violent tears. Can't talk. Can't talk. Can't talk. Can't talk. Can't talk. Ralph. Honey, give me the phone. She surrenders it to him. Hello? Hey, Pop. Merry Christmas. No, this isn't George. This is a buddy of his. Isabel wants to talk to you to tell you how happy she is, but she just broke up with emotion. You know how it is, don't you, Pop? Newlyweds? They're naturally full of emotion. They got to go through a little period of adjustment between them. Fine. Yeah, she's fine. She'll talk to you as soon as she blows her nose. Hey, honey, your daddy wants to talk to you. She takes the phone, then bursts into violent sobbing again, covering her mouth and handing the phone back to Ralph. Pop, I'll have to talk for her. She's all shook up. He forces the phone back into Isabel's hand. Isabel, choked. Dad? She bawls again, covering the mouthpiece. Ralph takes the phone back from her. Ralph. Pop? Just talk to her, Pop. She's too shook up to talk back. He forces the phone into her hands again. Isabel. Dad? How are you, Daddy? Are you? That's wonderful, Daddy. Oh, I'm fine too. I got married yesterday. Yesterday. How is Mom? Just the same? Daddy, I may be seeing you soon. Yeah? You know I gave up my nursing job at Barnes when I married, and so I have lots of free time, and I might just suddenly pop in on you tomorrow. I love you. I miss you so much. Goodbye. Merry Christmas, Daddy. She hangs up blindly and goes over to the Christmas tree. I think it's awful your little boy's missing his Christmas. Such a wonderful Christmas. A choo-choo train with depot and tunnel, cowboy outfit, chemical set, and a set of alphabet blocks. George. He knows what he's got for his kid. You don't have to tell him. There's a pause. Isabel. Well, now I feel better after talking to Daddy. George. Does it make you feel uplifted spiritually? Isabel. I feel less lonely, that's all. George. I wonder if it would have that effect on me if I called my daddy or mama in Amarillo. That's in Texas too. Maybe I'd feel less lonely. Huh, a little bit? She starts out. Just a minute. I want to tell you something. In my 34 years, I've been with a fair share of women. And you are the first. You are the first of the lot that has found me repulsive. Isabel. I don't find you repulsive. Not even your vanity, George. Silly, but not repulsive. Ralph. Hey now, you all quit this. George. Can you stand there and tell me you find me attractive? Isabel. I'm afraid I can't. At this moment. George. Well, God damn it, what in the hell did you marry me for? Isabel. Mr. Bates, your animal is standing by the door as if it wants out. Shall I let it out for you? Ralph. You two are just going through this adjustment period that all young couples go through. Isabel. Such a sweet animal. What is the animal's name? George. The animal is a dog. Isabel. I know it's a dog. George. Then why don't you call it a dog? Ralph. Better put her lead on her. Her name is Bess. Isabel. Shall we take a walk, Bessie? Huh? A nice little run in the snow. See? She does want out. Oh, my coat. Ralph. Here, put this one on, honey. He takes the beaver coat out of the Christmas box under the tree. Isabel. Oh, what beautiful sheared beaver. It's your wife's Christmas present. Ralph. It was, but it ain't no more. Isabel. How soft. Now I know that you love her. You couldn't feel the softness of this fur and not know it was bought as a present for someone you love. Ralph. Put it on. It's yours. A wedding present to you. Isabel. No, Ralph, will you please put it on you? Isabel. I guess the snow won't hurt it. Come on, Bessie, that's a good lady. Come on. She goes out. George. I know of 2 animals that want out, and one of them ain't no dog. Isabel, returning. I heard you say that. George. Well, good. Isabel. If you want out of our marriage, a divorce isn't necessary. We can just get an annulment. So maybe last night was for all. She stares at him a moment and then goes back out with the dog. As they leave, the dog is barking at something outside. George comes up beside Ralph and rests an affectionate arm on his shoulders. The tempo now becomes very fast. Ralph. You old Texas jackrabbit. George. You tail gunner son of... How do you feel? Ralph. I feel fine. They chuckle slyly together. Then they catch each other in an affectionate bear hug. George. How much money you got? Ralph. Why? George. Remember how we talked about going into something wonderful or something together when we got out of the service? Well, we're out of the service. How much money do you think you can raise? Ralph, what are your assets, buddy? George, I saved $500 and can get 1,000 for that 52 caddy. Ralph, you can't go into no business on as little as that. George, you're selling out this house and everything in it, ain't you? Ralph, I'd have to split it with Dorothea, I reckon. George, look, let's cut out tomorrow. Let's go to Texas together. We can swing the financing to pick up a piece of ranch land near San Antone and raise a herd of fine cattle. Ralph, why San Antone? George, I said near it. It's a beautiful town. A winding river goes through it. Ralph, uh-huh. You mentioned swing the financing. How did you visualize that? George, notice my car out there? Ralph, that funeral limousine? George, we cut out of here tomorrow bright and early and drive straight through to West Texas. In West Texas, we get us a colored boy, put a chauffeur's cap on him, set him back of the wheel. He drives us up in front of the biggest San Antone bank, and there we demand an immediate interview with the president of it. My folks staked out West Texas. The name of the first George Haverstick in West Texas is engraved on the memorial tablet to the Alamo heroes in San Antone. I'm not snowing you, man. And there's no better credit card in West Texas than an ancestor's name on that memorial tablet. We will arrive at lunchtime and invite this bank executive to lunch at the San Antone Country Club, to which I can get us a guest card, and before we're in sight of the golf links, the financing deal will be swung. Ralph, man, a bank president has rode in an awful lot of funeral processions. It's almost one of his main professional duties. He's rode in too many funeral limousines not to know when he's in one. And ain't you afraid that he might, notice your shakes? George, this little tremor would disappear completely the moment I crossed into Texas. Ralph, I hope so, man. Permanently and completely, but George, go on. Tear down the project. Ralph, there's no Ralph Bates. First, second, third, fourth, or fifth on that memorial tablet to those Alamo heroes. George, haven't you blazoned your name in the memory of 2 wars? Ralph, who remembers 2 wars, or even one after some years? There's a great public amnesia about a former war hero. He goes reflectively to the front door. George, where you going? Ralph, I'm going out to think in this cool night air. He exits onto the paved terrace, switching off the interior lights. George follows bravely. Ralph stoops to light up a string of colored bulbs that cover the arched entrance to carport. It casts a dim rainbow glow on the terrace. Shadowy flakes of snow drift through it. Why San Antone? Why cattle? Why not electric equipment? George, I know San Antone and cattle. Ralph, and I know electric equipment. George, yes, you can turn on a set of little Christmas tree lights. Ralph, I don't want to be your ranch hand. George, we'd buy an equal. Ralph, how? 1 minute you say you'll liquidate all your assets that only appear to be an old funeral car. The next you say we'll drive a bank president out in this funeral car. And you want me to put up all that I realize on the sale of this property here? Your sense of equity is very unequal and shitfire anyhow. Even if I sell this property by a remote control from Hong Kong, and Dottie's folks would sure in hell block the transaction. Well, look at the cracks in the stucco. You know how they got here? This goddamn High Point suburb. Listen, happens to be built over a great big underground cavern into which it is sinking. George, sinking? Ralph, I'm not snowing you, man. This whole community here is gradually sinking inch by year into this subterranean cavern, and the property owners and the real estate promoters are in collusion to keep this secret about it. So we can sell out to the next bunch of suckers. Disgusting. George, built over a cavern. Yes, a big subterranean cavern, but so is your project, not to mention your marriage. Cattle. Cattle? George, the Texas Longhorn isn't just cattle, it's a dignified beast. Ralph, did you say Texas Longhorn? Son, the Texas Longhorn is not only dignified, it is obsolete. George, historical. Yeah, like the Haversticks of West Texas. Ralph, the Haversticks of West Texas are not yet obsolete, are they? George, I am the last one of them, and the prospects of another don't look bright at this moment. But the Texas Longhorn, he exhales, compared to modern beef cattle such as your Hereford or your Black Angus, it has no carcass value. Well, in that case, why don't you breed the Black Angus or the George? I anticipated that question. Ralph, I hope you're prepared with some answer. George draws on cigarette and flips it away. Let me put it this way. How would you like to breed a herd of noble cattle? A herd that stood for the frontier days of this country? And ride to the depot one morning in your station wagon, the name of your ranch stamped on it, to watch these great dignified beasts being herded onto a string of flat cars, penned in and hauled off to K-City packing houses, Chicago slaughterhouses, the shocking atrocities which cannot even be thought about without a shudder, and wave 'em goodbye as if they was off for a mother-loving church picnic. Ralph, it's a heartbreaking picture, he chuckles. But I do love a good steak. A prime cut sirloin, however. What would you want to breed this noble herd for? For kicks? For George, you got TV in there, ain't you? Turn on your TV any late afternoon or early evening, and what do you get? Beside the commercials, I mean. A goddamn Western on film. You know what I see? Outside the camera range? A big painted sign that says Haverstick Bates Ranch. Or Bates Haverstick. You can have top billing. The last stand of the Texas Longhorn, a dignified beast. We breed cattle for TV westerns. We breed us some buffalo, too. The buffalo is also a dignified beast. Almost extinct. Only 30,000 head of the buffalo left in the land. We'll increase that number by a sizable fraction. Hell, we could double that number before we... Ralph, hang up our boots and saddles under the dignified sky of West Texas? George, with feeling. There is dignity in that sky. There's dignity in the agrarian, the pastoral way of existence. A dignity too long lost out of the American dream. He is shaking a good deal with emotion, as it used to be in the West Texas Haverstick days. Ralph, but I want to be dignified, too. George, human dignity is what I'm... Ralph, I don't want to be caught short by a Texas Longhorn while I'm crossing a pasture one morning in West Texas. Nah, I don't want to catch me an ass full of Texas Longhorns before I can jump a fence rail out of that West Texas pasture. George, shut up, will ya? You TV watching, canned beer drinking, Spanish suburban stucco type son of a... You know, I think beer is doped. Doped. I think they dope it to create a national tolerance of the TV commercial. No. No, I'm sorry I come through Memphis. He moves away sadly. I cherish the memory of you. Carolers are heard from a distance. Idolized an old picture of which I was suddenly faced with a goddamn travesty of it when you opened the door and I was confronted with a defeated, middle-aged, negative lost... Poor bastard. Ralph, what do you think I saw when I opened that door? A ghostly apparition. George, me? Ralph, a young man I used to know with an old man's affliction, the palsy. George, thanks, I appreciate that. Next door the carolers sing, God rest ye merry gentlemen, may nothing ye dismay. Oh man, oh brother, I sure do appreciate that. He sits down quickly, shaking fiercely in a metal porch chair, turning it away from Ralph to face the audience. Ralph is immediately and truly contrite. Yeah. In addition to those other things I mentioned in you, you've now exposed another which is the worst of the bunch. You've turned vicious. Ralph. Aw, now. George. Yeah. Yeah, bitter and vicious. To ridicule an affliction like mine, like this, is vicious. Vicious. He holds up his shaky hand. Ralph reaches his hand out to take it, but doesn't. Instead, he drops his hand on George's shoulder. Take that mother grabbing hand off my shoulder, or I'll break it off you. Ralph, you ridiculed my afflictions. George, what afflictions? Ralph, my life has been an affliction. He says this without self pity, simply as a matter of fact. George, now don't make me cry into this can of Budweiser with that sad, sad story of your childhood and that home for the illegitimate orphans. Ralph, foundlings. Home. I was not illegitimate. George, foundlings are illegitimate. Ralph, not necessarily, always. He says this with a humility that might be touching to anyone less absorbed in his own problems than George. Ralph looks up at the drift of snow from the dark. No. I meant to live a life in a Spanish type stucco cottage in a high point over a cavern. That is an affliction for someone that wanted and dreamed of. Oh, I wish I could be the first man in a moon rocket. No, not the moon, but Mars, Venus. Hell, I'd like to be transported and transplanted to colonize and fertilize, to be the atom on a star in a different galaxy. Yeah, that far away even. It's wonderful knowing that such a thing is no longer inconceivable, huh? George, you're talking out of character. You're a dedicated conformist, the most earthbound earthmen on earth. Ralph, if you think that about me, you've never known me. George starts off the terrace. I'm going walking, alone. He stops abruptly. No, if she sees me walking, she'll think I'm out looking for her. Ralph, God damn it, why don't you? Intercept her, and don't say a word. Just stick your hand inside that beaver skin coat I give her and apply a little soft pressure to her solar plexus, putting your other arm around her waist, and bring her back here gently. George, that's what you want to do. Go on. You intercept her, and bring her back here gently. Ralph, okay, I would like to do it, but do you think I'd do it? George, can you honestly say you wouldn't put the make on her if you thought she'd give in? Ralph, nope, I wouldn't do it. And if you don't believe me, get back in that funeral hack and drive to West Texas in it, you legitimate bastard. George, nope, I don't think you would. You're too much of a square. Ralph, there's her. There she is. George, where? Ralph, corner. Why, she's turning around. She must be lost. Go get her. Look, the carolers. George, good. Let her stay with them and sing carols. Ralph, no, I better go get her. George, go and get your own wife. Leave mine alone. Ralph puts his arm around George's shoulder. And I told you to keep your rotten hand off my shoulder. Ralph, break it off me. George, what I mean is, the point is, you chose your afflictions, married into them. Mine I didn't choose. Just come on me mysteriously, my shakes. You wouldn't even be interested in the awful implications of an affliction like mine. He holds up his shaking hand. Ralph, sure I'm interested in it, but, George, suppose it never lets up. This thing they can't treat or even find the cause of. Suppose I shake all my life like dice in a crapshooter's fist, huh? I mean, at all moments of tension, all times of crisis, I shake, huh? And there's other aspects to it besides the career side. It could affect my love life, huh? I could start shaking so hard when I start to make out with a girl that I couldn't do it, you know? Couldn't make the scene with her. There's a slight pause. Ralph, what was that it? George, was what? Ralph, was that the trouble at the Old Man River Motel last night? You were scared of impotence with her? Was that the problem? George, I don't have that problem. I never had that problem. Ralph, no? George. No. Tense pause. Why? Do you have that problem? Ralph. Sometimes. I wasn't excited enough by Dottie to satisfy her sometimes. George. I thought of her old man's money couldn't always excite you. The thought of her old man's money couldn't always excite you? Ralph. Nope, it couldn't always. That's the truth. He switches off the lights senselessly and switches them back on again. Poor old Dottie. She's got so she always wants it, and when I can't give it to her, I feel guilty. Guilty. He turns the Christmas lights off again, turns them back on again. George. Well, you know me. An ever-ready battery built in me. Ralph, turning to him with a slow, gentle smile. Yeah, I understand, son. George. Don't be so damned understanding. Ralph. Well, there she goes. Mrs. George Haverstick the Fifth. Look, she's going up to the wrong Spanish-type stucco cottage. There's 5 almost identical ones in this block. George. Don't your dog know where it lives? Ralph. Oh, it's a dignified beast. A constant Frigidaire pointer. Points at the Westinghouse fridge and whines for a handout whenever you enter the kitchen. Knows everyone on the block and pays calls like a new preacher wherever he thinks. Whistles at a dog. He might be offered a whistles. Handout. Voices back down the block, hearty, drunken. You better go get your wife. That Spanish-type stucco cottage is occupied by a bachelor decorator, and you know how they destroy women. He is running a sort of unofficial USO at his house. Servicemen congregate there. George. Ha! He is amused by the picture. Ralph. I gotta climb back. I gotta climb back in the back window because you shut this door and I had put the catch on it. He crosses out the door to the carport as George gazes gravely off. The carolers are closer. They go into God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen again. George is not inclined to be merry. He glares into the starless air. In the bedroom, a window pane is smashed and Ralph's arm reaches through, his fingers groping for the window latch. He finds it, gets the window up, and clambers through with some muttered invectives against the hostility of the inanimate objects of the world. As soon as he enters the interior, light and sound inside are brought up. Oddly enough, a TV Western is in progress, approaching the climax of an Indian attack or a cattle stampede. It catches Ralph's attention. He turns gravely to the TV set, for the moment forgetting George outside. Gunfire subsides and the dialogue is brought up loud. Dialogue. Save your ammunition, they'll come back. How long have we got? Till sundown, they'll hit us again after dark. Let's make a run for it now. We'll have to abandon the wagons if we make a run for it. The Rio Grande is at least 5 miles south of here. Mount the women. 1 woman behind each man on the horses, unhitch the horses. Then stampede the cattle. That'll give us a cover while we make our break. What is our chances, you think? You want an honest answer or a comforting answer? Give me the honest answer. The comforting answer would have been 50-50. I'll leave you to imagine the honest answer. Rosemary? In it. Take this pistol. There's 5 shots in it. Save the 5th shot for yourself. Now get on this horse behind me. Oh, Buck, I'm so scared. Get up, okay, sweetheart? Yes. Hold on to me tight. Dusty, when I count 10, start the cattle stampede. He starts counting slowly. George to himself as he paces the terrace. Now, I don't even want her. If she asked me for it, I wouldn't give it to her the way I feel now. Sneezes. Catching a cold out here? What's he doing in here, the motherless bastard? Bates. Bates. Remember me? Ralph, opening the door. I thought you'd gone for your wife. Ralph chuckles and holds the front door open as George withdraws his head from the window and reappears a moment later on the terrace. Ralph lets him in. George. Will you look at that? A Western on Christmas Eve, even. It's a goddamn national obsessional. Ralph. Yep. A national homesickness in the American heart for the old wild frontiers with the yelping redskins and the covered wagons on fire and George, will you look at those miserable short-horned cattle? Those cows in this corny western. They both face the TV. There's a pause. Ralph. Yep, an undignified beast. Man, buddy, I don't have too much confidence in the project of the dignified West Texas Longhorn Ranch, even now, but I will go along with you. Don't ask me why. I couldn't tell you why, but I will go along with you. Want to shake on it, buddy? George, that champagne ought to be cold now. Let's break out the champagne now. Ralph, it'll still be colder when you picked up your wife. George, I told you my policy. Don't interfere with it, huh? Ralph, women are vulnerable creatures. George, so's a man. Ralph crosses to the kitchenette door. I'll open the champagne while you pick up your wife. George, Ralpho? Man? Ralph, huh? George, now I know why I come here. You're a decent square. The kitchen door swings closed on them. Carolers are singing out front. After a moment, Isabel appears before the house with the dog. A lady caroler appears on the terrace with a collection plate. Isabel. Oh, I'm afraid I don't have any money to give you, but she knocks at the door. Wait, till they answer the door. Raucous voices are heard within. Some people regard the celebration of the birthday of Jesus as a sort of occasion, excuse for just getting drunk and disgusting. I'll probably have to go around the back to get in. Great howls of hilarity have been coming from the back of the cottage, drowning out Isabel's efforts to draw attention to the front door. I'm very sorry. I just don't have any money. The caroler accepts this in good grace and leaves. Isabel goes around through the carport. A few seconds later, George, in a state of Wild West exuberance, comes charging out of the kitchen with a champagne bottle, shouting, George, Powder River, Powder River, a mile wide and, Ralph, 2 inches deep. He follows them out as Isabel's head appears through the open window in the dim bedroom. She lifts the dog through and hoists herself over the sill. George, get me that pitcher with ice and 2 cans of that Valentine's ale, and I will make us a black velvet. Ralph, huh? George, man, you know, black velvet. He's back in the kitchen. I made it that time in Hong Kong when we had those girls from the... Ralph has gone in behind him. The door swings shut as Isabel picks up the bedside phone in the bedroom. Isabel. Operator, I want a cab right away. It's an emergency. Yes. Slight pause. Yellow cab? Checkered? Well, please send a cab right away to... Oh my goodness, I can't tell you the address. Oh, I'll find out the address and I'll call you right back. Right away. She hangs up with a little stricken cry, followed by convulsive sobs that she stifles forcibly. On the bed, in the pink-shaded lamplight, she looks like a little girl making a first discovery of life's sorrow. Instinctively, she reaches out for the infant of Prague. At the same time, the carolers start singing below the terrace. I wonder as I wander. This is a sentimental moment, but not sticky. Little boy Jesus, so lonesome on your birthday. I know how you feel. Exactly. She clasps the infant to her breast tenderly. Just exactly. Because I feel the same way. Dim out.